friends. I'm so happy because, today happens to be Madras Day. And there's some euphoria going around, people sharing photographs of old Madras on Facebook. And, it's so many events happening. In fact, we attended a very nice event for Madras Week featuring Saukar Janaki Amma. So we do, there's like the euphoria of Madras. So much so that all of us decided to be in the Madras spirit. And so the guest, Bala and Avis, are both turned out in Veshtis. Of course, I know I'm not as elegantly turned out as Saukar Janaki Amma, but try to make the grade. Welcome everybody and happy Madras Day to you all. Thank you, Bala, for accepting and being here with us this evening. Those of you, of course, I think most people know me here because we have some regulars. We have a Bliss Catchers community that comes quite regularly. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Vani. I happen to be the wife of Avis Vishwanathan. He's the curator of this series and a life coach and author of the book Fall Like a Rose Petal, which is based on a true story about our lives. Those of you who already know this is the 8th edition of the Bliss Catchers, but for those of you who are new, we're trying to talk to people to understand what makes them, choose what they are doing right now. They did have other options. They did have options of wanting to do something else, but they chose to do this. So why did they choose to do what they are doing? That was what made us, start this event series. And I think we've had some very exciting conversations in the last 8 months. Bala, I'm also eagerly waiting to hear what made you choose, your passion of following theatre. I do know that Bala is an IAS aspirant who made a shift to theatre, and all of us are eager to know what made him choose that. He's from the National School of Drama, and he also runs a very popular theatre company called Theatre Nisha. And he's often termed as the thinking actor-director. I think, in fact, our son, who is your Ashirwad, who is your Chela, described him as the only thinking director, actor that he knows and he adores and idolizes. So thank you, Bala, for being here. I'm going to let Avis take over and sort of lead us on to the Bliss Catchers path, the trailblazing Bliss Catchers path, because when we talk about it, we often discuss about how people often get caught in terms of earning a living and forget the living part of it. It just becomes like a run on a treadmill where you're getting nowhere. So over to Avis and Bala.
Good evening, everybody, and happy to see everyone. Happy Madras Day. I think Bala is perfectly attired. I'm one notch lower on that. I think you take us back to Madras of the Madras Pattanam days, and I'm more in the typical Ambadavai Saindrikara Mama level, so it's somewhere there. Bliss Catchers, and I was telling Geeta a little while ago that we didn't plan for this event to happen on Madras Day. These dates are blocked at least like 6 months in advance with ODC and with us, and we work on a 75 to a 90-day kind of schedule ahead. So it was only last week that I suddenly discovered, thanks to Ashwin of ODC pointing out that the event is happening on Madras Day. And I it would be completely inappropriate to start this event without telling you all, and I'm sure all of us will agree, that to me and to many of you, Madras is bliss. This city is bliss. 20 years ago, we came to this city. I was born here, but I never wanted to live here. Left this city, went away scornfully because did not like the heat, did not like the dust, did not like the dirt, did not like the Tambram way of life. Went looking for many things, but curiously, life brought us back to Madras. By then, it had become Chennai, 1996. And now, when I look back and whenever I travel overseas and come back, I long to be back here. And, to me, the Mallipu smell is bliss. The சாயங்காலம் காத்து in the beach. பீச்லேருந்து வர காத்தும் பீச்சில் இருக்கிற காத்தும் ரெண்டுமே இஸ் பிளிஸ். சிலப்போ ஆட்டோக்காரங்க கூட சண்டை போட்டாலும் அதில் ஒரு பிளிஸ். இட்ஸ் டிஃப்ரெண்ட் திங்ஸ். டாஸ்மாக் கடையில் ஏறி இறங்கி அந்த ஒரு பாட்டிலை வாங்குறதுக்குள்ளே ஒரு பிராணமே போயிடும். அதுவும் ஒரு விதத்தில் பிளிஸ் தான். ஸோ I don't think we can quantify the amount of joy that the city gives us, despite all its inconsistencies and incongruencies in some ways. So, on that note, welcome you, Bala, because one of the questions that's going to come later on is why Madras? Okay, so I'm letting one question out of the bag, okay, for you. So it's interesting, as Vani said, we know of Bala for all the time that our son has been growing up, our children have been growing up, and particularly our son, who had a great life in theatre here in Madras. Today I will use the word Madras as much as possible. And he was a part of a group called The Landing Stage. And Bala was his mentor and directed a couple of productions for them, or more, at least two of them. Ashirvad, our son, was involved. So we know of Bala from all that time, watched you many times quietly in the audience, and have always come away thinking, feeling enriched, and completely taken in by the way you have gone about telling your stories. So we are great fans, admirers, surely, and thank you for joining us. So when I Googled Theatre Nisha Balakrishnan, I actually just remember Googling Theatre Nisha Bala. And among the searches that came up was one interview that you had given. And that interview got me thinking, because he was a man who went out to, did your economics in St. Stephen's, Delhi? Okay, so he did his economics and he was an IAS aspirant, right? And then decides to switch to National School of Drama. So I'm actually going to begin the conversation by asking that question. Why IAS in the first place? Any particular thought, or was it just at that time everyone was thinking IAS and you thought IAS too?
My father, when he passed away, he was an additional secretary in the Ministry of Commerce, and he had been Rajiv Gandhi's special assistant and also Lal Bahadur Shastri ji's private secretary. So in that sense, my entire childhood had been spent watching this man, whom people are coming to meet, and I used to feel like Michael Corleone, watching my father and people coming and talking to him. So there was no other idea in my mind but to become something like him. I also wanted to enter into the civil services and enjoy that same kind of an atmosphere with people and that kind of a political arena, etc. So that was I think that is what kind of never allowed me to think about anything else but civil services.
And you people were living in Delhi at the time?
Yes, I was born and brought up in Delhi.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And so you were preparing for IAS exams, and then you chose to enroll yourself for an extracurricular activity in the evening, which was the Sriram School of Performing Arts,
That's
right?
Yeah.
So why theatre and why Sriram Center for Performing Arts?
by then, we had moved to a place called Mayur Vihar in Delhi where we were staying. And the Sriram Center for Performing Arts, A, was pretty close to this place, just across the ITO bridge. And secondly, it was heavily subsidized. Unlike the theatre courses of today, which cost a bomb, I think that costed me something like 150 rupees a month. And it had stalwarts of Indian theatre coming to teach there. It was one of the epicenters of theatre in Mandi House. So in that sense, it became a natural choice, but it had an audition which I had to pass. I didn't have too many hopes of passing the audition because I had never ever attempted the professional stage or even knew anything about theatre by then. But somehow I cleared the Sriram Center certificate course interview and started my evening course journey with them.
But why, since you didn't have a background in school of being in plays or being in theatre, why did you choose theatre? Was there any specific reason, or was it a random decision?
It was just one evening when a friend of mine, who is now a professor in JNU, Dr. Radhika Menon, we had just finished college. She just called up and said that there is this ad which has come in evening news about Sriram Center and they are looking for people for their certificate course. And you are anyway complaining that you are doing nothing but sitting at home the whole day trying to prepare for your civil services. Why don't you go there for a break? It will help you, and I think you can act. She was the first person who used these words, that I think you can act. So somehow I said, let's just give it a shot.
And that's how you ended up
In Sriram Center.
In Sriram Center.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that time in Sriram Center when so 2 points here which I want to pick up here before I proceed. Just we'll mark it and I'll come back to it. So here's somebody who never had any interest at the school level in acting, or has not done and never had an experience of theatre in school. That's one. And the second is Radhika Menon tells you, I think you can act, right? So we'll park it and we'll come back to it in a little while. But when you entered and you started, your evening course with them, what happened? Walk us through some of your experiences that you can recall, and was there a defining moment that, and how did that defining moment occur? That made you say, okay, Bala, this is it. Did it happen like that, or was it an evolving decision?
I think it was an evolved decision, because even when I started the course, my mind was still on studying my economics, my public administration, and the course still remained an evening course. But then 3 men happened in the course of that year, 3 stalwarts, 3 great names of Indian theatre. B.V. Karant, also known as Baba Karant, who is no more. Habib Tanveer, again he is no more. And Ranjit Kapoor. And these 3 stalwarts of Indian theatre were there directing plays with the Sriram Center repertory. And the Sriram Center repertory wanted 2 apprentices, basically to iron costumes, carry boxes, buy the tickets, just be around. And they picked 2 of us from the evening course. I was again very surprised to be one of those who was picked up. But once I got picked up, then it became from an evening course to an almost through the day sitting and staying at Sriram Center. So Habib Tanveer's Jinne Lahore Nahi Dekhya, B.V. Karant's Babuji, and Ranjit Kapoor's Janpat Kiss were the 3 plays which made me realize at that time there's no other place on earth I want to be except on stage.
Awesome. So how long did this happen, this evening course? How long were you part of the repertory?
This was supposed to, this is an one year course. I think nowadays it's a 2-year course. It used to be a 1-year course. And once I got involved with the repertory's place itself, then we started traveling through North India from place to place performing. And by then somehow the civil service ideas, my notes, all my public administration booklets had kind of gone to the Raddiwala by then.
So it took about a year?
An year.
Okay. Which year are we talking about?
1994 starts around June, ends around 95 April.
Okay. So in that time, you were kind of clear.
Cleared.
This was it. You were not going to do it.
Yes.
So how was it? Was it easy making that decision at a personal level? Because remember you said it was a childhood aspiration to be like your dad.
Yes.
And I think most of us, can relate to that as we grow up, we want to be like our parents. There is a father figure or a mother who's very successful in some ways, and we say, can I be like that? So it must have been, something that was always within you to be an officer, a bureaucrat, mainly to have the power. I think you were just trying to describe that.
Yeah.
So was it a difficult choice for you, A, and B, Bala's mom is here. How did the family take to it? When you went back and said, "Hey, listen, guys, I don't want to do IAS. I'm going to do theater." So, what kind of a scene was it at home?
Well, to answer the first question, I realized that if I had become an IAS officer, I might have made my dad happy for a few seconds. But I realized that by becoming an actor, I could make him proud forever. And and my family completely supported me. Like even though those were times when uh, financially we were not very stable, but
This often happens at public catches, as we notice that people do talk about a part of them which has brought them this far, and many things. We all go through these emotions, so we can completely understand. And I always tell people that it's perfectly all right to feel emotional, because if you're not happy being who you are, then you're not enjoying the privilege of your lifetime. The biggest privilege of our lifetime is to be who you are. And getting to that point is an emotional journey. And so you're going back in time, and I do understand. Yeah. So the family was going through.
My family was going through a difficult phase, but the support was immense. And I mean, from the family side, there never was a question, why theater? How about earning some money? That was never there. So, in that sense, I should say I'm lucky. That part got a little bit eased. Yes.
And you never looked back? You've never looked back? Have you ever sat back and thought, saying, "Agar main IAS officer hota, Babu hota to"?
By then, I guess another dialogue had caught my fancy. मुझको है ज्ञात रीति केवल आक्रमण की, मुझे या मेरे अस्त्रों को मेरे पिता ने पीछे हटना नहीं सिखाया.
What to translate that? Help me if I get the translation wrong. But can you say that again? I got the second line.
मुझको है ज्ञात रीति केवल आक्रमण की. I know but the concept of attacking. Neither me nor my weapons know. My father has not taught me or my weapons the art of stepping back.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you had a new dialogue in your head for that. Okay, fantastic. I've heard this the first time, but the essence of that is very, very important. So let's go back to the couple of points that I parked aside. One is that sometimes when we are trying to define, in Bala's case, it was not even a conscious definition of what he wanted to be. It was something that was happening around him, and he just ended up being there. So the universe always sends us signs, and Radhika's sign to you was, you can be an actor, and you probably didn't take it seriously then, but sitting in the repertory, working with the company, traveling with them, I think watching those 3 plays that you named kind of clearly gave you that idea that this is what you want to do. So the universe always sends you signs, sometimes through people, sometimes through events. And it need not be necessary at all that what you're doing needs to be something that you've qualified in or have had an inclination about doing. For example, I never, had any background in speaking, in public speaking, or today I deliver talks. People come to listen to me, but I used to have the biggest amount of stage fright, and you're a person who always tells people how to get over their stage fright, but I just was pushed into the deep end of the pond, and I realized I was a natural on the very first day I delivered my first speech way back in 1997. So the learnings are that go with the flow and heed the universe's learnings. signs. Very, very important. Heed the universal signs. Keep your antennae up. Very, very critical. So let's continue your journey. So you got into the
Sri Ram Center.
Sri Ram Center, and you made this choice, and then you applied for the National School of Drama. Okay, how was that experience in the National School of Drama in terms of validating your choice? Were there any specific aha moments there that you were gung ho about the fact that yeah, this is the decision, and I'm glad I took it?
Well, after I finished with Sri Ram Center, I had applied for the National School of Drama, but like any other aspirant, I knew that my chance of getting through were like one in almost 500 or 600. That because National School of Drama selects only 20 students every year, out of which only 16 are open seats. So 16 people from all over India.
And how many people apply?
3,000, 4,000.
Even today?
More today.
More today, but the numbers are still the same?
I think they have now made it 25.
That's very generous of them.
I think they have made it 25 now. So, whether I would get through or not was an absolute question mark. And if I don't get through, then what? Was never there in my mind.
Somehow, how was that? I mean, how old were you then?
20 and a half, 21-ish, yeah.
So at that time, you didn't have this lurking suspicion in your head, what if I don't get through?
No, it never entered my mind at all because I didn't have a plan B. I had applied for NSD and all I knew was that next step is NSD. If it didn't happen, then what is a question I did not face then and I dare not face today.
That's awesome. I'll just come back to you. I think those who have attended the previous editions will know that a question that is often asked of the guest, and Bala has kind of answered that question up front. The question that is often asked is, so did you have a plan B? And I'm also asked that question sometimes, saying, did you have a plan B? And those of you who don't know our story, we are going through a cathartic financial crisis in our life, Vani and I and our 2 children. And we are asked this question again and again, do you have a plan B? And the answer we have is that there is only one plan, and that is the master plan. And the master plan has no flaws. So there are no plan Bs. If this doesn't work out, agatum parkalam. Let's get there, we'll deal with it. So I'm glad you, at 2021, you had that clarity. I got it, man, at 35 after blowing up all my money and, kind of soaking myself in spirituality, But that's amazing. That's very prodigal. So go ahead. So you never thought about a plan B. You didn't have a plan B, and you got through. You were one of those 16 who was selected on the merit criteria. So tell us a little bit about that experience that helped you validate. Were you seeking validation, A, and B, even if you were not seeking validation, were there anything like you said you saw 3 plays that made you sure this is what I want to do? Was there an aha moment? Was there a defining moment?
I was very sure that I was not among the best actors of that age group. There were lots of other actors in Mandi House at that time who were maybe far better than I was. But what I didn't know at that time was that National School of Drama is never looking for brilliant actors to take into the tutelage system. It wants people whom it thinks it can train. And I think on that count, I was a very, very able candidate who knew nothing. So someone who could be taught brilliantly. And I had played my arrogance card by then because I went to the National School of Drama interview with a speech in Sanskrit.
Wow.
So I wanted to do something which I was sure nobody else would have attempted. And I wanted to do something to make sure that they remember me when they are totaling up their marks. So I did it in Sanskrit, and later my teachers told me that they found it very funny that I was standing there and screaming and shouting all those dialogues from the top of my head. And apparently they kept telling me, lower your voice, and I didn't pay any heed to them. I said, I'll finish my speech, only then will I stop. But when I got through, I knew that it was a very humbling experience because I could see many people who were sitting outside NSD. They were literally weeping
That they couldn't make
that
it.
they couldn't make it. But the fact was that they were already brilliant actors. They just now needed to go out and be on stage. They didn't need a tutelage. So, in that sense, I felt it was a very humbling that NSD has chosen us because it feels that we can be molded. And it was now time to completely surrender to whatever NSD has to offer. And that point, first year started.
And how long was this course?
It's a 3-year course.
It's a 3-year course. And you had, in those 3 years, did you have opportunities to think of the real world? Did you at all think of the real world after NSD? What is it? Bollywood? Is it Tamil cinema? Is it you set up Theatre Nisha much later. So what does a person at that stage in NSD think of when you're planning your future?
I would say out of the 20 people who enter NSD, 16 of them think of going to Bombay to follow in the footsteps of our esteemed peers like Nasiruddin Shah, Umpuri, Rohini Hathangadi, Mukesh Tiwari, Nawazuddin Siddiqui. People want to go to Bombay and become big. But then there are the 4 of us who want to do theatre. And nothing glorifying or noble about it. It's just that we found our happiness and pleasure in being on stage. So these 4 plan either to get some fellowship, some kind of scholarship, or join the National School of Drama Repertory, or take some kind of financial aid from the government and go to their own states and set up some small theatre units. So this used to be the usual plan of the 20 people who are in drama school. And at that time, my plan was to join the National School of Drama Repertory after I finished NST.
That was your plan.
That was my plan.
Did you at any time, and this I'm asking because I think many people here will have that question, often we are judged as we grow up, and especially in that formative time between, there are a lot of youngsters, so this question is very relevant to them and their families. We are judged in terms of how well we are doing in terms of our cousins, the extended family. Lapar, avan vandu engineering mudichittu MBA pandran par. Avan vandu velaiku poitan par. Avan nana mark vaanginde research scholarship vaanginde poitan par. Those kind of talks start coming around at that time. And theatre and NSD, or even an actor in Bollywood, a startup actor in Bollywood, however, even Nawazuddin Siddiqui, for example, has to go through a long haul, right? Anyway, whether you choose theatre or whether you choose films, you have to go through a long haul. So did you have to deal with any of those pressures, even if not from your parents, but from your extended family, or your own classmates from school who would have already started earning a living and started, note bana rahe honge?
I think after I entered NSD, I had cut off from everyone except my immediate family. So never talked to any uncles, aunts, anyone. Those advices would flow thick and nice. That
Unsolicited.
Yeah, they would say that, hey, you're done. You're going to finish your NSD. You're smarter now. Why don't you try your IAS now? It'll be much easier for you. I had a grand aunt who passed away a few years ago, but till her dying day, she used to say, take a bank job, do theatre in the evening. You need a steady income. When she was a sweet soul, she always felt that I needed a steady job. So I just didn't pay any heed to any one of them. As long as I had my immediate family support, it just didn't matter to me.
Awesome. So you never let those thoughts come into you?
Never.
Now, I want to ask you specifically, I read somewhere, so there was an offer for you in films, and you did act in one film, and I saw you on their wiki page even credited for a role there in Bharati Raja's film called Taj Mahal, where he launched his son in 1999, am I right? Yeah? 98, 99, sometime. So you did try your hand at films. So was it a conscious decision to try a medium and then decide whether you like it or not? Or was it because an offer came and you couldn't say no? And that is A. And B, how did you decide that, hey, listen, I don't want this. I'm not going to pursue more of this. I want to stay rooted to theatre. So talk a little bit about that formative decision-making phase.
Once again, the sheer arrogance of the North Indian. Staying in National School of Drama, we had no idea of what's happening in the South. Maybe the only filmmaker we could name was Mani Ratnam, because Tirda had come to one of the festivals. We know Kamal Haasan because Mahanadi played at the festival. We don't know of anyone else. And someone casually mentioned that there's Mr. Rajiv Menon in Madras. He does theater. Go and meet him when you go there. And when I came to Chennai, I called up Rajiv Menon by taking his telephone number from the directory. That's a lost art nowadays. And called him up. I think I talked to Lata, and I said I want an appointment with Mr. Rajiv Menon because I'm a theatre actor from National School of Drama. That used to be like, that the announcing thing, National School of Drama. So she was very sweet. She said, yeah, come on Wednesday, meet him. I go there, and then I meet Rajiv, and he tells me, I am not a theatre person, I am a film director, and I'm working on a movie right now. And he was doing Minsara Kanavu at that time. He said that I don't have a role for you, but let me send you to my friend Mani Ratnam. He is doing a movie. Why don't you meet him? So from the office of Rajiv Menon, opposite to MCTM school at that time, I walk to Venus Colony to Mani Ratnam's office. I meet Mani Ratnam on the spot because Rajiv has called him and told him this boy is coming. And Mani is making a movie, which is Alai Payude. And he says, I might have a role for you, and let's meet up in a few days. And then he calls up to say that my shooting might be postponed, but let me send you to my friend Bharti Raja. And he's making a movie and he's looking for actors. So I go into Bharti Raja's office. I'm expecting an audition. I'm expecting some questions on theater, acting, something. He just looks at me and he says, I like your eyes. I'm casting you. And I was like, hey, I'm here for 3 years of training and you say you like my eyes, so you're casting me. And he casted me in his movie, but unfortunately the movie didn't do well. And Tamil cinema is very strong on superstition. So if a film doesn't do well, then those actors are not. But I can tell you one secret, that before Taj Mahal was released, I was almost booked for 3 films with 3 big actors of that time to play the villain. But once Taj Mahal bombed, that all went away. And my experience with the film industry by then had also told me one thing: I'm not happy. I am not at all happy in a film unit where there are white chairs for character artists, blue chairs for the villains, and there's a red chair for the director and the heroine. Junior artists have no chairs. The food is served separately. There is difference in the quality of the food, the way the money is dispersed. There's a lot of issue with that, and a lot more of exploitation and abuse which one could see in front of one's eye, and I can't do anything about it. I don't want to be a part of it. So around that time I said that I am not entering into this. Yes, after that a few friends did call me and I did small roles in a few movies, but post 2006 I said no more acting in cinema for me ever.
So for you, the no cinema choice was more a choice, more related to the way cinema is being administered?
Absolutely. I love the medium. I think it's a great medium.
That was my question.
Yeah, it was the people around. It was a kind of status games which are played. It is the kind of humiliation which is meted out. It is the kind of blind worship which is done. People could keep nudging you. Director is coming. Go and touch his feet. Why the hell will I touch his feet? I don't touch anyone's feet. Why will I touch his feet? No, you must do it. It's a director. Go and say good morning. Be like, why should I do that? And I can't take that culture. I found that ridiculous. I said, no, theater is democratic. Theater is equal. The director and the person who cleans the costumes, they eat together. And that is the medium I want to belong to, not this nonsensical place where everything is according to who you are and what you are. So I said, no, struggle. The day you become a star, you can do this. I don't want to do this.
Fantastic. I think that brings us to another big learning. I'll just pause for a second to just amplify that learning. I think those that decide to do what gives them joy also are very clear about what they don't want to do in life. It's extremely important for you to know what you don't want to do, as much as it is important for you to know what you want to do. And I want to ask you a question here, that when you took that call, you were very clear. Perhaps I'm asking you, were you very clear that you were probably walking out or saying no to with all your talent, as you are today, one of the finest actors on theater, one of the, as our son says, a thinking director, a feeling director, a man who champions democratization of the stage, right, and the medium. For all that genius in you on that day, around that time that you said, I don't want to be in films, you were possibly shutting yourself away from a whole amount of material wealth. were you conscious of that decision, or is it something that you think back and you feel you could have done differently?
Maybe I had taken that decision in anger with a lot of youthful enthusiasm, but I knew my test was the day the next movie will be offered. And since the day I took the decision, till the day movie offers stopped coming, I refused 10 movies simply because of the kind of terms and conditions they were meeting out. And at times when I was doing plays, when I was doing Dr. Gauri Ram Narayan's Flame of the Forest, I had 3 movie offers coming within a week. But I said no because I am doing a play. It was again nothing glorifying about it. There's nothing noble that I am giving up the film for the theater field. But my heart told me, hey, this is where you are finding your ultimate happiness. You will be unhappy there. You don't want to go there. And I knew it. And once I took the decision and said no, I felt like a ton of bricks had been lifted off me. I felt free at that time.
So after the offer stopped, you felt free.
Yes.
During the time that you were doing, let's say, Gauri's play, were you able to compare the feeling of joy that you were experiencing while being on stage in the theater medium as compared to what was happening in the film industry?
Film industry, I never felt any joy. Also because of the way the medium is, film industry is shot by shot by shot. So you never get the chance to explore that euphoria. There were moments when there was a scene when I shot for Taj Mahal. I finished it and Moon Singh came and hugged me and she kissed me and she said that was a beautiful shot. Unfortunately, that was not in the movie; they edited it. But that was a moment of elation that a senior actress came and hugged and kissed you and said that you were brilliant. So one felt like I have arrived. But again, it's just a momentary thing, and one knew that actual happiness is not coming. And when we are working with Dr. Gauri Ram Narayan, we were rehearsing on her terrace, and we were just sipping our tea from a thermos. And but it was a communion. There were 20 of us. It was enjoyment. We all went home happy after every rehearsal.
And so that kind of validated your decision in the years to come.
Yes.
You've never looked back. You've never sat on a terrace someday and looked at the moon and thought, "Kash, agar main ek star hota."
No, I just need to see one film and laugh and say, yes, good decision.
Okay. Let's come to Theatre Nisha now. So the decision was made. You immersed yourself in theatre, and obviously you learned from people that you worked with, and you came to the decision to set up your own theatre company. Did you realize as you were setting up a theatre company that a company really obviously immediately moves from just a creative definition to the definition of an enterprise, which logically concludes that it must earn an income and generate a profit? Did you approach it from that point of view, or was it
Of the company. And an year ago, I had just in a whim said that if I ever have a theatre company, I'm going to call it Theatre Nisha because Nisha means darkness. And once again, the youthful enthusiasm that from darkness towards light we will go. So I had said Nisha. And also, it is a word which it's one of the first words I had ever taken on stage.
Oh, okay. In
Yeah.
your first play.
Yeah, kya yahan hai, nisha yahan hai, usha kahan, oh ab kaho. So that nisha was kind of stuck with me. And I said, fine, we are Theatre Nisha. And when we did the first and the second play, again, it was just about identity. But later, as people started joining me, people started contributing to the group, I realized that they too have to earn their living from what we are doing. And since my theatre days, I have had one goal, which is that theatre must be self-reliant. We must not be looking for sponsors to pay us to do our plays. Theatre must be able to support itself. And now we had people in Theatre Nisha, 3-4 people, but they needed to be paid. So it was at that time that some more decisions came in that we need to earn money. And let this money come by taking classes, by doing other theatre work. So whatever we will do, we will be doing it, which is part of theatre. But we will also do things which can bring in money like classes, designing other people's play, writing plays. So all that came into support. And at that point, it kind of became a sort of a company.
And you've maintained it that way? Even today, is the philosophy to be self-reliant?
Yes.
How do you manage? I mean, you do. I think you do more than 5 or 6 productions in a year, or am I wrong?
No, last year we did almost 12.
12.
And
Okay.
this year we have done like five to six
Already.
Already, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you how do you sustain on a self-reliance, philosophy in an intensely competitive market where both the tickets, the paid-for audiences, and your sponsors, if at all they come by, are having distributed attention. You know, they have other choices. So how do you run this?
We don't approach for sponsorship. All plays are done on our own. Once in a while, some people do come in to support the play, and when they support it, it's unconditional. It is just that they're supporting or writing off some kind of costs. That's happened once or twice in the otherwise 16 years of Theatre Nisha. We produce our own plays. We lose money also with each play. The amount of times we have made money through a play is maybe twice among all the plays which we have done.
But I mean, you're talking about 16 years and twice?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
But we managed to kind of fill the gaps with the classes which we take place, the workshops we do, and that money we kind of put it into theatre. So even when the people who work in Theatre Nisha take their salary for the classes, a part of it goes into producing the next play.
So would I be right in saying that the people that are associated with you in Theatre Nisha are also people who deeply believe in the joy of being in theatre, in the medium?
Unfortunately, yes.
I don't necessarily agree with the qualification of that. Yes, but nevertheless, we'll stay with it. So you earn money through other means, connected with theatre, connected with the stage, and you put it back in Theatre Nisha. So it's almost like a like a social entrepreneurship initiative, right? I mean, it's you want to give joy to yourself and to the audiences and to your cast and your crew, and you fund it through your own internal accruals. And you're happy with it.
Yes.
You sleep well.
Very well.
So there you are. This is what bliss can give you, you know, which no intoxicant and no marundu. You know, when I say marundu, it's people who suffer from insomnia. As you grow older, you start taking a couple of pills here and there. None of that can give you the kind of sleep that you can get when you are absolutely soaked in bliss. So you're a very rare species. Do you realize that? Has anyone told you, Janani? His wife is here, Janani is here, and
I have had this good luck of also meeting a lot of good people along the way who have contributed to whatever we're doing without ever having talked about it. People who have bought 10 tickets for a show when they were going to use only one ticket. So we have people like that also in the audience today, who have bought like 10 tickets because they knew they wanted to help out, and not in a charity kind of way. They bought tickets, 10 tickets for one seat. And the people who work with me, I mean, the kind of work they put in, if they were in a corporate field, they should be earning like 2 to 3 lakhs every month. What they earn with me is like 1/10 of it, maybe. But it's again, it's not me. It is them and it is theatre. And it is me and theatre binds us all together. So basically, all of us are working for this huge company called theatre.
Awesome, awesome. I don't even know how to describe this, this takeaway, because I can relate to it completely. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I want to tell you that this entire series, The Bliss Catchers, is based on the philosophy of Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell's biggest line, his philosophy is very simple, but his most powerful line is, if you follow your bliss, doors will open for you. And if you stay in the zone of your bliss, you will be connected with people who will take you onward in life. And I have felt it. Vani has felt it. I'm sure, you are talking about it. Janani has seen it. So we often stay away from doing what gives us joy because we are worried about what will happen to our material life, our living, our money, our requirements, our needs, our wants. And there I'm reminded of Rumi, my favorite poet, the 13th century Persian poet, who says, sell your cleverness. Sell your cleverness by bewilderment, by complete amazement, by bewilderment. So sell your cleverness. I think we are trying to be too clever. Because we are educated, because there is a career trajectory that everyone has chosen, the herd has chosen, we take that career trajectory saying, I have to earn a living and I have to support a family and I have to put money in savings because I have to buy a house, I have to have retirement benefits and all that. So nothing wrong with that. But if it's making you unhappy, doing something that you don't want to do at all, then what's the point in the entire life that you have been given? So Rumi says, sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment by doing what gives you joy. Because when you follow what gives you joy, doors will open, people will come into your life. And 16 years and still sustaining. Look at this man. I love you, man. I'm going to play you an audio clip now, which is that'll give us just sit back and it's a couple of minutes audio clip. It's by this famous British American philosopher called Alan Watts, and he talks about following your bliss in a very similar way. And I think all of what Bala has said today kind of ties in with that philosophy. Just sit back, open your mind, open your soul, and allow Alan Watts to talk to you. Bear with us for a couple of minutes, and we'll be right back after the clip. Yes, sir.
What do you desire? What makes you itch? What sort of a situation would you like? Let's suppose, I do this often in vocational guidance of students. They come to me and say, well, we're getting out of college and we haven't the faintest idea what we want to do. So I always ask the question, what would you like to do if money were no object? How would you really enjoy spending your life? Well, it's so amazing. As a result of our kind of educational system, crowds of students say, well, we'd like to be painters, we'd like to be poets, we'd like to be writers, but as everybody knows, you can't earn any money that way. Or another person says, well, I'd like to live an out-of-doors life and ride horses. I say, do you want to teach in a riding school? Let's go through with it. What do you want to do? When we think that is to go on doing things you don't like doing, which is stupid. Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way. And after all, if you do really like what you're doing, it doesn't matter what it is, you can eventually you could eventually become a master of it. It's the only way to become a master of something, to be really with it. And then you'll be able to get a good fee for whatever it is. So don't worry too much. Somebody's interested in everything. And anything you can be interested in, you'll find others will. But it's absolutely stupid to spend your time doing things you don't like in order to go on spending things you don't like, or doing things you don't like, and to teach your children to follow in the same track. See, what we're doing is we're bringing up children and educating them to live the same sort of lives we're living, in order that they may justify themselves and find satisfaction in life by bringing up their children, to bring up their children to do the same thing, so it's all retch and no vomit. It never gets there. And so, therefore, it's so important to consider this question, what do I desire?
Thank you, Muruganandam, for that clip. Thank you. So there you are. It's so stupid. I think we have one word, bliss, and the non-bliss word is stupid. So in my case and Vani's case, we came through to bliss by sheer accident, a cathartic accident. In your case, you came through with a very courageous choice. So I'm going to dwell a couple of more minutes before we open the floor for questions. I want to ask you, obviously, and Janani is here, your mother is here, we are here, we are all compatriots in that sense. How do you deal with your dark days? How do you deal with times when there isn't enough. And there is a lot of joy, there is a lot of inner peace. But the world, a factory hand in Pune once told me when I was talking about bliss and talking about to the whole team, I was telling everyone कि खुशी से काम करो, जी लगा के काम करो, दिल लगा के काम करो. अगर काम करना नहीं आता है तो छोड़ दो, लेकिन जो काम करते हो दिल से करो. உள் மனசோட வேலை செய்யுங்க. வேலை செய்ய தெரியலன்னா விட்டுருங்க. சந்தோஷமா இருங்க. சந்தோஷத்தை வேலையில காமிங்க. That was my inspiration that I was giving them. And one factory hand stood up, said, waved to me and said, Sahab, Avis Sahab, भाषण से राशन नहीं भरता साहब. நீங்க பிரசங்கம் பண்ணத்தினால இப்போ வந்து the kitchen fires are not going to be lit. So how do you deal with those situations? Do they come at all, and how do you deal with them, and how do you overcome them and move on in the field of bliss?
I think both me and my wife, neither of us are very interested in acquiring and possessing lots of things. I think our wants and needs are very, very simple, not very expensive wants. And even if we have some expensive wants, we plan for it. So, in that sense, I mean, whenever we have had times of little tight situations, they have not been exactly dark days. They have been okay. I mean, we have been fine. I mean, I mean, she's there. My Theatre Nisha team is there. My gurus are there, and it's been easy to go through them in that sense. I haven't felt. In retrospect, sometimes I have felt that, oh my God, that day was a very dark day. But the dark day, when it occurred by itself, in that moment, it wasn't that dark. Because there was a lot of action happening at that moment itself to just move on. When in retrospect, then you feel like, oh yes, that was I hope I don't get that day again. So, haven't, in that sense, come face to face with a dark day, understanding it's a dark day. Have understood it's a dark day much later.
Awesome. I can relate to that totally. We do that. We've gone through that all the time. I think this whole definition of dark day, it comes from, us qualifying what we want. It comes from a want. It comes from a desire. And I think whenever there is a want, there will be agony. So as long as you don't want things to be different and are just living through a time which is the way it is not complicated. I can tell you that. I remember when my book was being launched last year, August 1st was the launch of the book. It was in the month of May that the publisher decided that I'm finally going to put your book out in the market. And we needed to get the book going, and it's a trade secret, if I can tell you, an open trade secret, that authors have to support a good part of the budget for the launch of any book. And the last thing, my book is all about the fact about how do you live without money. So last thing we had with us was money. We didn't have for ourselves. Where was it going to come for bankrolling a book? But I remember going to the Hyatt. So we didn't have a car, and we go to Hyatt in an auto rickshaw, and we go to the hotel on Mount Road and pay the auto rickshaw fellow. He haggles, so he spoiled your mood completely. We're going to meet the general manager of the Hyatt, whom we know through a customer experience, and he had said, okay, I sent him an email. I have a proposition for you. This is an interesting book. Would you launch it for us? That was the meeting. So we're going there, and May, imagine Chennai, then Agni Nakshatram, and soaking wet, arguing with the auto fellow. I mean, it wasn't that we wanted to argue, but he wanted the argument. So it cost me my white shirt, and I was soaking wet when I entered the hotel. And when we sat with the gentleman and talked about the book launch, he heard the whole story and he said, why are you sweating so much? And I said, leave that aside. I mean, I don't have a car. I came in an auto rickshaw and, this is what happened. He said, no, you want to freshen up? I mean, I'm going to do the book launch for you. So our book launch, actually the launch of a bankrupt man's book, happened in the shiniest of properties. Thanks to the goodness of one general manager who connected that, without reading the book, by just hearing the story, he connected the Hyatt group's higher purpose. Their higher purpose is empathy. They say our higher purpose is empathy. We are in business because we empathize with our customers. So he said, I can connect your book and your story with the higher purpose. So we will do it in 3 cities straight away: Chennai, Bangalore, Kolkata. And we got the launch. And it wasn't a simple launch. It was a launch with high tea, and they completely changed our life in a moment. So I can understand that when there is darkness, when you have no visible, tangible way, evidence in front of you, but you just do what you believe in doing, there will be a way which will open. And that happens again and again and again. So when our book was being launched and we had the 3 cities confirmed, now how are we going to go to those 3 cities? I mean, Chennai, okay, we can cover it, obviously, but Bangalore and Mumbai, Bangalore and Kolkata, how? I mean, they'd given us a room to stay, and the 2 cities were covered, but how do you get there? And so the gentleman may not, actually, I can name him because we anyway named him during the launch. I mean, he's Jeffrey Thomas of Amarantha Entertainment. Don't know him from Adam. He supports only people with desiring to win an Olympic medal or a Grammy. And we walk up to him and we say, Jeffrey, this is our story. And he says, what do you need from me? I said, would you please support our travel? And he gives us the opportunity to travel. I mean, he buys us our tickets. So I think during the dark times, I can completely relate to you. You don't see the darkness because the people around you make it beautiful. And yes, when you look back, and that's where I always say, when you look back, you see 2 things. You see the phase that you've crossed, obviously, and you don't want to go back there. But you also see the beauty and the kindness of the universe, right? All the people that come into your life and make it so beautiful. So on that note, I like your definition that there isn't a time when you qualify as a dark time, right? We'll stay with that. We'll now open it for questions from the audience. The audience normally has a lot of interesting questions which we wouldn't have thought of. So we'll let it pass. And
how would you really qualify it? If your theatre had a full house, would it be a bliss? Or if nobody watching you, would it be a bad day? Or if critics wrote down your play, would you feel bad? I want to have your thoughts.
I'll take the second question first. I actually don't know how to qualify dark and bliss days. Most of it has happened in retrospect. And when the point at which a day by itself is happening, I've never thought of it. We have performed to houses where there have been only 2 people sitting in the auditorium, 3 people, lesser. Critics have more or less always panned my place, but they're all good friends. Absolutely no problem. As long as me and the team are happy with the effort which we put into the play, I think we come out smiling. And since we don't make regular profits on our play, there is no fear or there is no qualm on a certain day when we have not made a profit, because we have never made a profit. If we make a profit, most of us will faint and fall down or something of that sort will happen. So it's always like a break even or something like that. So I actually don't know how to qualify the bliss and the dark aspect, except mostly it is the good night sleep which lets you know that the day was fine or not. And regarding your first question, I was informally blacklisted in the National School of Drama when I finished my 3rd year because I had organized a strike in the school. And informal blacklisting basically means that it cannot be contested anywhere. So it basically is wherever you apply, you will be told, sorry, you haven't made it. I mean, like I said earlier, that I had my heart set on joining the National School of Drama repertory. I mean, where else in the country could you get a high-paying job as a theatre actor? But because of this informal blacklisting, the doors of Delhi theatre were literally closed for me. I couldn't get any fellowship, scholarship, nothing. I had actually no idea at that point what to do. And let me call that destiny. The Tamil film actor, Nasser, had come to NSD, and being a theatre lover, he had come to watch a play. And as a matter of fact, I think he had just, he had just made a statement, Bala, come to Chennai sometime, we'll work together. But somewhere stayed in the back of my head. And when Delhi was kind of shut for me, I realized, end of the day, Tamil Nadu is the land of my ancestors. I am from Tanjore. Let's just go and try our luck and see what happens. And 1998 June, I came to Chennai. I met Nasser. He said that the film I was talking to at that time, I'm sorry, I've shelved it. I'm not going to do it. But being the kind-hearted soul that he is, he said, but you know, Mr. Kamal Hassan, he's making a movie. It's called Mardanayagan, and he's looking for actors. Why don't you go for an audition to him? And I land up in Rajannamalaipuram in a flat, and Mr. Chakravarti, who is now the director of LV Prasad Academy, he is assisting Kamal in that movie, and he kind of prepares me for an audition in Tamil, a language I cannot read, I cannot write, and we don't speak Tamil in Delhi. We speak Delhi Tamil in Delhi. And I have no idea what those words mean. And he says, let's write it down. And Kamal comes in. And first time I'm seeing this man with this big dadi and all. I do my namaste. He does namaste. And he asks Chakravarti, what are you doing? He says, I'm just writing his text down in English for him. Kamal says, give it to me. I'll do it. You are required there. And I'm like, this man is going to write these lines for me. And they wrote it. And of course, the movie did not go on to be made. But I came to Chennai because I was informally blacklisted in the National School of Drama, and I did not want to go to Bombay. So Chennai was safer. Relatives, Marina Beach, Kabalishwar Kovil. There is that warmth about it. At least you can relate to it. I couldn't have related. If I had gone to Bombay, I could have been a nervous wreck. So I felt, and I didn't want to do movies, but there was no other option. After I came to Chennai for 2 years, 98 to 2000, I didn't do any theatre. I met people, I met Ms. Indra Patsati, but I just didn't get any opportunity till in 2000 I said, enough of trying to be an actor. The only way I can do the kind of plays I want to do is if I become a director. I specialized in acting in drama school, not in direction. But in 2000 I said, let's become a director and see where it takes us. So that's how I landed in Chennai.
I want to add on to Badri's question. Question that I want to ask you is, how do you deal with, I'm not talking about the profit part of it, when the house is not full and you have empty chairs, like we are seeing some empty chairs here today. From a social validation point of view, from a inner validation, do we need inner validation? How do you deal with it?
For me, it has always been, did I work hard enough on this play? Did I take it easy? Did I not spend the amount of time required? If I have not done that and that comes out as a social comment, I get hurt very badly. That for me is going back to the drawing board and starting from ABCD. But if I have put in the effort required, if my heart and soul tells me what I did was honest, what I did was truthful, it doesn't matter what people say. People might come and say many things for many reasons. They might say you were brilliant, they might say you were bad. Either way, they will have their own respected opinion about it. Like what my gurus have taught me, I don't let that affect me. I respect whatever comments people have to say, but end of the day, the truest comment always has to come from here. And that is what I like to follow because that keeps me safe.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that.
Well, coming from a Tam Bram background, and also the Dravidian thing, if you could permit me to call that way, is there any possibility of you getting yourself converted from an English drama person to a Dravidian vernacular dramas being coined by you in the near future?
Theatre Nisha has been regularly doing Tamil, Hindi and English plays.
Oh.
But the unfortunate fact is our Hindi and Tamil plays don't get any publicity. I commit many murders, but the newspapers never report them. In fact, my last Tamil play, which is going to now get repeated in the Surya festival, is Solladi Sivasakti. The writer of that play, Andal Priyadarshini madam, is right here. She's sitting there. it has gone to the Purusai Festival, it has been done at Spaces, at Allianz Francaise, at the Coimbatore Festival. Great. We have done Hindi plays which have traveled for lots of things, but newspapers report only English plays. The Chennai audience comes to watch only English plays. You go to the Metro Theatre festivals, you will see 1,000 people watching. You do a Tamil play in Chennai, nobody comes to watch.
How have your siblings reacted to your doing this?
My elder brother is an army doctor, and he has always been extremely happy and proud of what I have been doing and supported me through it. He will buy me army shoes and fatigues whenever I want them. My sister did her masters in arts and aesthetics. She's a Bharatanatyam dancer, and she has been pursuing her career. I've been pursuing mine. But after so many years, we have now actually started collaborating and working together. So in that sense, both my siblings have been very, very supportive of what I have been doing. They have slept through some plays also, but still they have supported me.
I actually had a question for Janani. You do work with Bala also, right? And two questions there. How is it working with somebody as, monomaniacal, if there is a word like that? I think there is a word like that, monomaniacal. With that kind of focus, okay?
What that means?
That basically means that Mr. Perfection, okay? Mr. Perfection, okay? Something like that, working with a person like that and living with that person, okay? How does it feel? And how does it feel that you're married to a person who's in love with what he is doing, but is probably in the real material sense not able to leverage his talent in a material sense? Does it matter at all?
When you were asking the question how it feels when we see an empty auditorium or empty seats, as a wife, I feel a bit dejected that my husband and the team has put in so much effort. And as a wife, I of course feel that he's talented, so I feel bad as a wife. But as a person who's seen him since 2000, the kind of journey I have been because of him, I don't think if I hadn't met him, I wouldn't have seen and experienced so many things that I have in these 15 years. As a person who's seen him grow these 15 years, I agree with what he says. If he is happy, if he thinks he's put in that effort, it really doesn't matter whether we make money out of it or not. And God has been extremely kind. Some way or the other, we've crossed. We've never had so difficult times, but we have crossed small problems. I wouldn't call it difficult, but God has been kind. Family members have been really supportive. So as a wife, yes, I feel that people should watch my husband's play and appreciate. But as a person who's seen him, been with him, whatever makes him happy.
And my first question on how do you work with Mr. Perfection? You work on plays with him, right? So
I think I'm exactly the opposite. So we balance out each other at some point or the other. So yeah, that's the best way I can put it, I think. But yes.
Bala, I have this question for you on creative freedom. And what does it mean to you? And do you think that people who come in to sponsor theatre in some way curtail the creativity of the people who are performing? Does that happen? And is that one of the reasons why you stay away from, and you produce your own plays and you stay away from sponsorships?
I mean, this entire journey of going to meet a sponsor, explain to him what I am doing, have him ask me 5 questions which he thinks is really intelligent, and my mind is saying, stop being stupid about it. And then, going, sir, ma'am. I don't think I'm able to manage that at all. And sponsors do demand a certain kind of theatre. If I am doing something like my last play, which was Amrapalli or Matahari or Soladi Seva Sakti, Aparadhini, all these plays dealt with very strong aspects of human nature. and may not have drawn in the kind of crowd a sponsor wants. So sponsor says, can you bring me between 16 to 20 years? I said, I can put a ticket which says below 16 not allowed. I can't say only 16 to 20 allowed. So how do you do that? Then you start catering to what they want. And if I'm not doing what I want, then I don't want to do it.
So they do curtail your creative freedom.
I mean, yes, and I don't think they curtail it, because they also have a lot of norms, rules, people to answer to. But at the end of the day, that's what it becomes. So it's simpler to work on our own.
A quick one or a long one, depending on how you want to answer it. You said that you are doing part-time at the Sri Ram Center, and then it turned out into a full-time engagement because of the apprentice role that you took up, right? And that year, that single year that you spent there kind of convinced you that this is what you want to do, right? So could you kind of touch upon that 1 year and say what exactly, coming from a safe and secure background and, being the son of an IAS officer in the pinnacle of Babudam, that's Delhi, and what made that switch? What was that? Where was that switch?
Although my father was on one of the highest positions of the Indian bureaucracy, he was a central government servant. He was not an IAS officer. When I first joined Sri Ram Center, my ideas of acting were what I had picked up from watching Bharate Khoj of Shyam Benegal. So to me, acting, I had a definition of what acting should be like. And the first thing I encountered on entering into Sri Ram Center was that you need to empty yourself. You cannot have any predefined ideas. And the people who were actually giving this education, I mean, they were all such worthy sons of theatre. People like Mohan Upreti and Sanjay Upadhyay. I mean, these are not names which people might recognize, because these people never became film actors, so they will never be recognized. But the kind of training they themselves had gone, it made me realize one thing, that this is the path. This is the way. I can feel this is the way. What I have been thinking acting is, I don't think I've been right about it. There has been pride in it. There has been some arrogance in it. There has been this concept of, I think I can cry well. I had this great pride in my voice that I can speak as loudly as I want. But these people showed that this is the way, and the way is first empty yourself. And I don't know whether we find these kind of teachers now. I mean, I endeavor to be a teacher like that. I don't know how far I am succeeding. But these are the kind of teachers I had, and the path became easy by itself. And much later I encountered this shloka from one of these Guru Bhakti, that Ajnana Timrandasya Jnananjara Shalakhaya Chakshurum Unminitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Applying the coryllium of truth to the eye so that the way can be seen. And these were the teachers who made me believe that this path is giving me peace. I don't even know whether I'll use the word happiness or pleasure or bliss, but peace. It is giving me peace. It's making me relaxed. And once I entered into the repertory as an apprentice, there was no more greater joy than actually running through Nizamuddin railway station with 2 suitcases balanced on my head and knowing that nobody can tell me anything. I could never have done it in my real life. It was good fun to run like a coolie, because I belong to theatre now. It gave me a freedom. It freed me. And I think these were these experiences which made me realize that this path has something peaceful for you. And where there was peace, I was very contented to be.
So beautiful. I think we're all blessed here. A little while ago, I was telling someone, I think I was telling Bala only, that all those who are ordained will be here today. So I think all of us are ordained to hear this coming from real life experience, and this is awesome. I can equate that feeling of running with those 2 suitcases on Nizamuddin railway station platform to the feeling that I had when I first met Vani in my life, and I remember, like, for all the pressures that were on me even then as a young teenager, kicking a pebble on the street and walking as if I was the king. That, I think that feeling is indescribable. We may call it by many names, but that feeling is indescribable. And that feeling comes only when you are totally immersed in what you're doing and you're relating to what you're doing. Many years ago, I met, just before he passed away, Mithran Devanesan. That's the only time in my life that I met Mithran Devanesan. And I know of him and I have, that's the only time that we had a conversation. It was at a cocktail party hosted by somebody on the beach, in one of the beach houses. And neither of us seemed to be enjoying the party. I mean, Vani had somebody to talk to. I was alone and I was drinking, and so was Mithran, and I knew it was him. So I walked up to him and I said, "Hello, Mithran, my name is Avis," and we started talking. And that was the time when our life was beginning to get torn apart and our business was collapsing and many things had gone wrong by then. So I was generally telling him, it's nice, the weather is good. He said, "What do you do?" And I said, I've decided now to do these things. And Mithran said, "Have you ensured that this is what gives you joy?" And I said, "Yeah, I've checked it out. This is what gives me joy." And he said, "Avis, at the end of the day, we will all go through pain. We will all go through pain. But you know how I deal with pain?" And he said, "I deal with pain in the manner in which I give my 100% to my productions. I enjoy the process. I see it go live on stage, see my characters come alive, and that dissolves all my pain." And I think that's pretty much what your experience is, and what anybody who's loving what they're doing, their experience might be. Your canvas is theater. Somebody's canvas is painting. Somebody's canvas is music. Somebody's canvas is just being the most efficient housekeeper, And somebody's canvas is being a great mechanic, But it's the canvas that changes. I think the feeling remains the same. Any other questions? One more question from Badri, okay.
Have you any thoughts of starting something like this here on school for some time?
He's already teaching a lot, so you should probably talk about your teaching.
I teach in schools, and sometimes in colleges, and sometimes in some institutes. Like I used to work with Mr. Balu Mahendra's in Mr. Balu Mahendra's Film Institute as the acting teacher for his department. But I don't want to start a school. No, I think it's too much pain.
Does the administration of an institution scare you? Is that...
No, what I'm afraid of first is even today, Theatre Nisha receives regular mails, messages and phone calls from people saying, "We want to become actors, so can we come and join? Tell us what your fees are." But I like to find out that why they want to become actors. They say they want to go into movies. I respect that. But I understand that they do not know that the way to get into movies is not through good acting. The last thing movie is looking for in today's time is good acting. It's anything but good acting. I don't want those kids to, we have had kids who have sold their land and said, "We have the money, we want to learn acting." And I don't want to give them that pain of going through director's office and one day realizing that the last 3 years what they wanted, they haven't been able to get it, and then feel depressed about it. The only people whom we take in are those who want to do theatre. Those who say we want to do theatre and we feel that our ideologies match. Our ideology is nothing more than be truthful, be honest. That's our only ideology. If that matches, we work with such kind of people. But as of now, Theatre Nisha has only 7 actors in it. So we haven't found too many people matching the ideology.
But it's a very powerful ideology. If we are all looking for truth, right? I mean, we all say we love the truth and nothing else but the truth and whatever. But I think if you want to see truth, walking, talking, breathing, living, enjoying and being happy, here it is in front of you. Bala, I think you embody that truth. And I think that is the most powerful energy I get from you. So it might be that, he doesn't have many of the trappings that stars have and, all of that. But I think we're not just talking to one of the greatest directors and actors, but also the truest person to himself or herself, So, do we have any other questions? I'd like to... Yeah, you have a question, Shankar? Yes.
I'm Shankar. I'm sorry I have to talk it in English. You said that Tamil plays are not being that much publicized or getting noticed. Being a professional,
do what you like is only half of it. The other half comes from the making the industry mature, making the language doesn't die, making the culture doesn't die. That is the other pure professional that we should look at. I mean, that's what I look at as a professional. So not only that I know I do what I like, but I also have to make sure that over a period of time I have contributed to the industry. Now I have seen that industry is matured and people are good and they are culturally not corrupted by English. So is there any goal or
Well, Shankar sir, first thing I must say is that I salute everyone like you who has these ideas that the industry has got to be changed or has to be contributed to. But I don't consider English to be in corruption at all. For me, language is nothing more than a medium of communication. And I love Tamil as much as I love Hindi, as much as I love English, as much as I love Sanskritam, as much as I love French. These are languages I can speak a little bit. That's why I mentioned these. So for me, it is not that if I'm doing an English play, those people are not patriotic enough. Or doing a Tamil play, these people need more support. I don't cater to that claim. And when it comes to about doing something for the industry, I don't think I have that kind of big goal at all. I'm just trying to work with the few people in my group, and if within us we are able to make ourselves a little better, I think end of the day that is sufficient for me. I think the industry is a little too big for me. I'll get scared. Theatre Nisha with its 7 people, if we can better ourselves day after day, I think that is enough satisfaction for me on my dying day.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Sriram.
Again, speaking loud enough. How do you select? I happen to see one of your plays, Mathematician, and I happen to see a recent play where you were associated, that was Flowers of Girish Karnad. How do you select these themes? I mean, there are a million themes for plays that you can choose from. Some could be plays, well-known plays, which could be done in a very innovative way, whatever. For example, Mathematician struck me as a play which, was a uniquely selected kind of play. So how do you, is there a process? Or is it just sheer luck, or someone refers this play to you? How does it happen?
The 2 plays which you have mentioned, sir, are very interesting because Mathematician was written by Dr. Gauri Ramnarayan specially for me. It was her idea that she wants to talk about the dichotomy of war and peace, and she chose the Babylonian setting to write that. And Flowers was the play chosen by T.M. Karthik himself, and he said, Bala, direct me in this one. I like this play. So these are 2 plays in which I actually did not have an option in making a choice. Of course, I loved both the plays. But within Theatre Nisha, the plays mostly present themselves. We read plays, but we never sit down and read 10 plays and say, hey, let's do this one. The plays are presented themselves. I started with last year I did a play with Meera called Aparadhini. We started with The Tale of Genji, the famous Japanese novel, and it finally ended up us doing Aparadhini, which revealed itself when we were doing our other research. Same way when I did Mata Hari with Shakti, one friend kept on mentioning Mata Hari, and she was this very seductive spy, and just one very simple Google search, and the amount of photographs I saw of Mata Hari, I said, there is more to this woman than the little I know about it. And we sat down and started researching all our biographies, and that play revealed itself. I did Amrapali with Janani. Now, Amrapali was something I wanted to do from 5th class since I have read the Amar Chitrakatha. It was a play with it was a story which touched me. And at the age of 42, suddenly from somewhere from my memory, it comes out and says Amrapali. Sat down and wrote that play and did that. Andal Madam Soladi Sivasakti, the short stories, we were reading them and they revealed themselves and we did the play. Again, I'm not trying to make a grandiose statement here by saying that the plays are revealing themselves to us and we are too big to select. We read a lot of plays, But it is one small thing from here and there. Someone mentions something and we catch on to it. I can just I'll tell you one very interesting incident here, that during the shooting of this movie called Samurai, in which both Nasser sir and I were associated, Nasser sir once just casually mentioned, Bala, there's this play called Barabbas, written by this Nobel Prize winner. I think it will make a good monologue. Check it out someday. I forgot, he forgot. 7 years down the line, I say, Nasser sir said that, let's just figure it out. I find the book. With great difficulty, I managed to buy that book. It's available nowhere. I take it, I learn it, I do 7 shows of that play. And then I tell Nasser sir that, sir, I did Barabbas recently. And he says, what Barabbas? I said, sir, you only recommended that book. Remember that Nobel Prize winner Par Lagerfeld's book? I said, no, Bala, I never told you anything like that. And I was like, I didn't dream it. He told me. He says, no, I never told you anything like that. So how this happened, I don't know. But a writer whose name I have never heard, a novel I have never heard about itself, revealed itself in a way I believe was by Nasser sir. He says no.
I'm reminded of how A.R. Rahman said how he composed Khwaja Mere Khwaja in his sleep. So these things happen. You were ordained to do it. So someday when we'll get a chance to watch it again, when you put up the production. Do we have another question? Okay, one of the things, yes sir, you have one question. That's the last question we'll take for the evening, because I do have a...
So what path have your children taken as they...
Nandakumar sir, we can't hear you.
No, what, your children, have they followed some other path, or what is it?
All my children are only my school children. I don't have biological children. And I think my school children, I have corrupted them quite a bit to follow the path of theatre. I think some of them are sitting here also today. And some of them have become cinematographers, actors, writers. So I do manage to do my satanic work every year, and children do get influenced.
Well, I think, thank you. I do have to manage time. One of the things we pride ourselves is we do allow a Madras delay, of 15 minutes to start. But whenever we start, we wrap it at the 90th minute, and we're 2 minutes away from it. So we are extremely grateful for all of you to take time out and come and be with us. Very, very grateful to Bala for being very, sporting. The moment I wrote him a mail, of course, I had to introduce myself, and I feel very proud about it. I had to introduce myself as Ashirwad's father at the end of the mail, and thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you, Janani. Thank you, Amma, for being here. And of course, our wonderful host here, Ashwin, who is doing many interesting things. One is that many things it's all happening at ODC, and it's also all going on YouTube. And with Murli's help, we'll reach a wider audience, So we're beginning to, capture all of this, as I called it, for posterity. On some Facebook comment today, I said, somebody thanked me, and I'm the most undeserving person for that gratitude. I think it all goes to Ashwin, because he's put his, complete might behind this series. So thank you, Ashwin, for that. I want to leave you all with what is customary when I sign off, with a thought that comes to my mind, which is that I think we all choose paths, or people that we know choose paths in life, because we are told that this path is more comfortable, this path is more secure, this path is more predictable, and everyone is on this path. I don't think there is a path anywhere on this planet which doesn't have every reason, every choice to postpone your bliss is punishment. So the difference between somebody who's following their bliss and the one that is postponing their bliss is that the one who is following their bliss is only struggling. The one who is postponing it is probably also suffering. And to quote Joseph Campbell in conclusion, Joseph Campbell said, you are looking for meaning in life. It's a meaningless life. And this, I think, Osho also says this very beautifully. He said, you have a choiceless birth, you have a choiceless death. You came with nothing, you're going to go with nothing. So it's a completely meaningless life. So Campbell builds on that and says, if you're looking for meaning in life, you're stupid. He says that you bring meaning to your life. And that meaning comes when you can be true to yourself. So Campbell says, why ask the question when you are the answer? Isn't that beautiful? So we all are the answer that we are seeking. Good night and happy Madras Day to all of you. Thank you.